The first laugh came from behind Grace Bennett. It was soft enough to pretend it had not happened, but loud enough for her to hear. Grace kept her eyes on 6-year-old Noah Mercer, who stood near the ballroom doors with both hands pressed over his ears. Hundreds of guests filled the Mercer Foundation's annual children's gala. Music floated from a string quartet. Waiters moved between glittering tables. Camera flashes appeared every few seconds. Noah hated crowds. Grace had been invited as his nanny, but Victoria Lang had stopped her before she entered the ballroom. One of the catering assistants called in sick. Victoria had said, "You don't mind helping, do you?" It had not sounded like a question. Grace had looked at Noah, who was already twisting the silver button he carried in his pocket whenever he felt afraid. "I'll stay where he can see me." Now she balanced a tray of champagne glasses while watching him from across the room. Her left shoe caught against the carpet. The sole had separated again. Grace stepped behind a column and pressed the clear tape back into place. A crooked line of blue thread ran along the side where Noah had tried to repair it with his little sewing kit. A woman in a gold dress noticed. "Oh, my goodness," she whispered to her friend. "Look at her shoes." The second woman covered a smile. "Maybe the foundation should start a charity for its own employees." They laughed. Grace straightened and lifted the tray. She had learned how to continue moving when people tried to make her feel small. Her mother's hospital bills had taught her. Years of working in homes where people discussed vacations that cost more than Grace earned in 12 months had taught her. Still, she glanced toward Noah. He had heard them. His hands dropped from his ears. Victoria walked over in a fitted white gown. She followed the women's gaze to Grace's shoes. For a moment, Grace thought Victoria might stop them. Instead, Victoria smiled. "Grace, employees representing the Mercer family should maintain certain standards." Several nearby conversations quieted. Grace lowered the tray. "I understand." Victoria's eyes moved to the tape. A guest should not have to wonder whether a staff member's shoes will fall apart beside the dinner table. The woman in gold laughed again. Her friend added, "Those look like they survived a house fire." Grace felt heat move into her face. She looked at Daniel Mercer across the ballroom. He stood beside a group of investors, listening to a man in a tuxedo. Daniel was Noah's father and the CEO of Mercer Hotels. He had built luxury properties in 12 countries, yet he had not noticed that his son had spent the last 20 minutes fighting panic near the exit. Victoria leaned closer. "You should leave through the service entrance before the press starts taking photographs." Grace searched for Noah. He was no longer by the door. "I need to tell him I'm going." "I will handle Noah." "No. I promised I would never disappear without telling him." Victoria's smile hardened. "You are his employee, Grace. Not his mother." Grace placed the tray on a passing waiter's table and picked up her canvas bag. She had taken only 3 steps when someone pushed between 2 guests. Noah ran across the ballroom. He rarely ran in crowded rooms. Sometimes he could not speak when too many people were watching. But now he shoved past a chair, nearly fell, and threw both arms around Grace's waist. "Mom, don't go." The words carried farther than the music. Every conversation stopped. Daniel turned. Victoria's face changed. It was not surprise Grace saw in her eyes. It was fear. Grace knelt despite the torn shoe folding beneath her. "Noah, look at me." His face pressed into her shoulder. "They're sending you away." "I'm walking outside. That's all." "You said you wouldn't leave." "I said I would always tell you first." Daniel approached slowly. "Noah." The boy tightened his grip. Daniel looked at Grace as though seeing her for the first time. "Did you teach him to call you that?" Grace's embarrassment gave way to anger. "No." Victoria stepped beside him. "This is precisely the unhealthy attachment I warned you about." Noah flinched. Grace removed both shoes before standing. She held them in one hand and lifted Noah with the other. Guests watched her cross the ballroom barefoot, carrying the millionaire's son against her chest. Noah's cheek rested against her shoulder. Before they reached the hallway, he whispered, "Claire, Mom said I could have another mom if she was the one who stayed." Grace stopped. Daniel had followed them. He heard every word. His face went pale. Claire had been his late wife. Noah had not spoken her name in months. Daniel asked Grace to meet him in the family library the following morning. The room was larger than Grace's entire apartment had been before she became a live-in nanny. Daniel stood beside the window with his hands in his pockets. Grace's repaired shoes rested near the door because she had changed into an older pair for work. Noah sat in the hallway with colored pencils, close enough to see Grace through the open door. Daniel turned. "How long has he called you Mom?" "3 times. And you never told me?" "The first time was during a nightmare. The second was when he had a fever. Both times I reminded him my name was Grace." "But you allowed it last night." "He was terrified." "That does not answer the question." Grace folded her hands. "I was not going to correct a grieving child in front of hundreds of people while strangers laughed at the woman he was trying to protect." Daniel looked away. "Victoria believes you encouraged the attachment. Victoria believes anything she cannot control is dangerous." His eyes narrowed. "Be careful." "I am careful every minute I am with your son. You are employed to care for him, not replace his mother." Grace's voice remained calm. "When did Noah last sleep through the night?" Daniel did not answer. "When did he last enter a crowded room without checking every exit?" Silence. "Which side of his sandwich does he want the crust removed from?" Daniel's expression tightened. Grace looked through the doorway. Noah was coloring without lifting his head. "You think I'm trying to become important in this family. Mr. Mercer, I became important because no one else was there at 2 in the morning." Daniel sat down. For the first time, he looked less like a CEO and more like a tired father. "What happens at 2 in the morning?" "He wakes up looking for Claire. Sometimes he speaks. Sometimes he cannot. I tap twice before entering because sudden sounds frighten him. I leave the bathroom light on and keep the door open 3 inches. The light makes a narrow path across the floor." Daniel stared at his hands. "I didn't know." "That is the problem." Grace expected him to become angry. Instead, he nodded once. Over the next several days, Daniel began watching. He saw Grace tap twice on Noah's door before entering. He saw her place a glass of water on the same side of the nightstand every evening because Noah reached for it in the dark. He saw her cut the crust from only the left side of Noah's sandwich. "Claire did it that way," Grace explained. "The first week after she died, he refused to eat unless it looked the same." Daniel joined them at breakfast the next morning. Noah studied him suspiciously. Daniel cut the crust from the left side. Noah took one bite. It was not forgiveness, but it was something. That night, Noah woke screaming. Grace reached the hallway and found Daniel already standing outside the bedroom. "What do I do?" he whispered. "Tap twice." Daniel did. He entered alone. Noah sat against the headboard, unable to speak. Daniel did not demand words. He sat beside him and extended one hand. After almost a minute, Noah placed his fingers inside it. Grace watched from the doorway, then quietly stepped away. Later, Daniel passed Grace's room and saw the torn shoes beside the door. Noah's little sewing kit sat next to them. The next afternoon, he asked Noah about the blue thread. Noah wrote his answer on a drawing pad. Grace needed new shoes. Daniel waited. Noah added another line. She used the money for Ethan's test. Ethan was Grace's younger brother. He was completing an electrical certification that would allow him to earn a full wage. Daniel found Grace in the kitchen. "You paid your brother's exam fee instead of replacing your shoes." "He needed the certification." "You could have asked me for an advance." "I did not want one." "Why?" "Because I earn my salary. I do not want personal favors attached to it." Victoria entered carrying a folder. "This is what I have been trying to explain," she said. Grace encourages emotional dependence, then refuses ordinary professional boundaries. She handed Daniel a therapist's summary recommending a period of structured separation between Grace and Noah. Grace read it. "Dr. Patel never said this. The report is signed." She said consistency was essential. She said removing a trusted caregiver could reopen Noah's abandonment trauma. Victoria lifted her chin. Perhaps you heard what you wanted to hear. Daniel looked between them. Grace felt the old familiar weight of being the least powerful person in a room where powerful people controlled the documents. Noah entered carrying a drawing. Claire stood above the house beneath a red umbrella. Grace stood beside Noah, holding his hand. Daniel had been drawn far away near a black car. In one corner, Victoria held a white envelope behind her back. Daniel crouched. What is this? Noah pointed to the envelope. Then he turned the paper over. In uneven letters, he had written. Victoria took Mom's last letter. Victoria laughed when Daniel showed her the drawing. He is 6 years old. He remembers something, Grace said. He imagines many things. Daniel studied Victoria. Did Claire leave a letter? She left dozens of unfinished notes. She was heavily medicated. That is not what I asked. Victoria's expression softened. Daniel, Claire was dying. She accused nurses of moving things. She thought strangers were in the house. We agreed not to burden Noah with those memories. Grace noticed the word we. Daniel noticed it too. That evening, Victoria entered Grace's room without knocking. She closed the door behind her and placed an envelope on the dresser. 6 months' salary. Grace did not touch it. You want me to resign? I want Noah to develop normally. He is grieving. He is attached to an employee who allows him to call her mom. I corrected him when it was safe to do so. Victoria's voice became quieter. Take the money. Leave this week. I will tell Daniel you resigned for family reasons. No. You should think about your brother. Grace stood. Do not speak about Ethan. He still has tuition payments. You have debts. Your shoes announce that before you enter a room. Grace looked down at the blue thread. Those shoes announced that someone small cared enough to fix them. Victoria's mouth tightened. If you remain here, I will prove that you manipulated Noah. You will not work for another family in this city. Grace opened the door. Then I should start gathering proof of my own. She told Daniel about the offer that night. He confronted Victoria, but she did not deny it. I was protecting your son, she said. Grace has become too emotionally involved. Daniel asked for Noah's complete therapy records. Victoria promised to retrieve them. Grace did not wait. The next morning, Noah sat beneath the kitchen table twisting the silver button he always carried. It had come from Claire's favorite red coat. Grace had seen the coat in family photographs. The buttons were shaped like small flowers, with one long petal. Why do you carry that? She asked. Noah looked toward the hall before whispering. Claire Mom said when grown-ups forget, the button remembers. He led Grace upstairs to Claire's old sitting room. No one used it now. A small writing desk stood against the wall. Daniel said he had never found the key. Victoria had suggested donating it unopened because the drawers contained nothing important. Grace knelt. At the center of the desk's carved design was a flower-shaped indentation. She held out her palm. Noah placed the silver button in it. The long petal fit perfectly. A hidden lock clicked. Inside the narrow compartment lay an old audio recorder, a safe deposit receipt, and a photograph. The photograph showed Claire, Grace, and Noah outside Massachusetts General Hospital beneath a red umbrella. Noah was 2 years old. Grace remembered the night. Claire had received frightening test results, and Daniel had been overseas. Grace had held the umbrella while Claire cried in the car. The recorder contained no memory card. Someone had removed it. Daniel entered as Grace examined the safe deposit receipt. He looked at the open desk, then at the button. She never told me about this. Perhaps she tried. His face hardened with shame. The receipt came from a private facility in Boston. An account number had been written on the back. Victoria appeared in the doorway. For 1 second, her eyes moved directly to the recorder. Then she composed herself. You opened Claire's private desk. Noah opened it, Grace said. Victoria stepped forward. Give me the recorder. Daniel blocked her path. Why? It may contain medical information. Then Grace and I will review it with the attorney. Victoria looked at Grace. Claire was not herself near the end. Grace held the empty recorder between them. Then why are you so afraid of what she said? Victoria left without answering. Daniel rubbed a hand across his face. I owe you an apology. Grace gathered the photograph and receipt. An apology matters only if your next decision changes. The next morning, Daniel arranged access to the private facility. The safe deposit box had not been opened in almost 2 years. But the access log contained one earlier entry. 3 days after Claire's death, Victoria Lang had entered it alone. The safe deposit box was almost empty. A single red mitten lay inside beside a piece of paper containing 16 handwritten numbers. Daniel stared at it. She used to hide clues in ordinary things, he said. When we were dating, she made me solve a puzzle to find my birthday gift. Grace turned over the mitten. A tiny blue stitch marked the cuff. The numbers did not match any bank account. Grace photographed them and sent the image to Ethan. Her brother called less than 10 minutes later. It looks like a backup recovery code, he said. Maybe cloud storage or an encrypted drive. Daniel's attorney located an account registered under Claire's private email address. The handwritten numbers unlocked it. There was one video file. They watched it in Daniel's library with the curtains closed. Claire appeared on the screen wearing a blue sweater. Her cheeks were pale. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes were clear. Daniel, she began, I hope you never have to see this. Daniel sat completely still. Claire said she knew her health was failing. She knew Daniel loved Noah, but she also knew he escaped whenever grief made him feel powerless. You build things when you are afraid, she told him. Companies. Schedules. Plans. But Noah will not need a plan after I'm gone. He will need a person who stays. Grace covered her mouth. Claire looked directly into the camera. Grace has already become that person. Grace's breath caught. She does not replace me. No one can. But she knows when Noah is pretending not to be afraid. She knows he hates the dark but does not want anyone to know. She sits outside his door when he cannot sleep. She has given him love without asking him to call it anything. Tears moved down Grace's face. Noah does not need another woman pretending to replace me, Claire continued. He needs the woman who already stays when he is afraid. Daniel lowered his head. Grace remembered every time Claire had thanked her for small things. A packed lunch. A washed blanket. A quiet hour with Noah. She had never known Claire understood the cost. The video continued. Claire explained that Victoria had pressured her to send Noah to boarding school after her death. Victoria said Daniel would be too busy to raise him alone. Claire had refused. Then she discovered unusual transfers from the Mercer Foundation to a consulting company connected to Victoria's father. I asked Victoria about the money, Claire said. She told me her father would lose everything. She promised she would repay it after the wedding. Daniel looked sharply at the screen. Claire said she copied the records onto the recorder's memory card. She also wrote Daniel several letters, but Victoria controlled her visitors and intercepted private mail. I should have told you sooner, Claire said. But you were already disappearing from us, Daniel. Every time I tried to speak about dying, you found another meeting. Daniel stood abruptly and walked to the window. I was working, he whispered. Grace did not comfort him. Not yet. The door opened. Noah stood in the hallway. Claire's voice filled the room. He walked toward the screen. Mom? Daniel turned. Noah touched Claire's frozen image with one finger. Is she mad at me? Daniel dropped to his knees. No. I cried too much. No, Noah. She went to the hospital because I made her tired. Daniel pulled his son close. You did nothing wrong. Your mother was sick. I should have explained that. I should have stayed with you. Noah looked at him. Why didn't you? Daniel's face broke. Because I was afraid, and I acted like work was more important. That was wrong. Noah leaned into his father. Grace sat beside them. After a moment, Noah reached for her hand too. Does calling Grace mom make Claire disappear? Daniel shook his head. No. Love does not erase people. It makes room. Noah placed one hand against Daniel's cheek and the other against Grace's. The video resumed. Claire mentioned the missing financial evidence, but the final minute was damaged. The image broke into blocks. Her voice became distorted. A single frame appeared before the recording ended. The red umbrella lay on the hospital floor. Beside it were Grace's old black shoes. Noah stared at the screen. Then he pointed. Mom hid something in the umbrella the night she died. Grace turned to him. How do you know? I saw Victoria take it from her room. They never reached the umbrella. 2 police officers arrived at the Mercer estate the following morning. Victoria stood behind them with Margaret Mercer, Daniel's 71-year-old mother. Margaret looked confused and frightened. An officer asked Grace to open her suitcase. Inside, beneath her folded clothes, was Claire's diamond bracelet. Grace stepped back. That is not mine. Victoria covered her mouth. I hoped I was wrong. Daniel entered. What is happening? Victoria handed him printed security images. The timestamps showed Grace entering Claire's old bedroom after midnight. Another image showed her carrying something beneath her sweater. Grace examined the photographs. I entered the room with Noah 2 nights ago. He was sleepwalking. I carried his blanket. Victoria turned to Daniel. She has access to every room. Noah trusts her completely. We do not know how long this has been happening. Grace looked at Daniel. Say something. His face showed doubt. That hurt more than the police. The Mercer board called an emergency meeting. Foundation donors had already begun contacting Daniel. His attorney warned that publicly defending Grace could damage the hotel company if more property was missing. Victoria insisted Grace be removed from the estate. This is not only about theft, she said. She has encouraged Noah to see her as his mother. He needs separation before the attachment becomes permanent. Grace's hands shook. It is permanent because he lost Claire. Daniel looked at the bracelet. I need time to understand the evidence. Grace stared at him. Claire needed time too. The words silenced him. Victoria found Grace alone near the service stairs. She carried a legal agreement. Sign this, and the complaint disappears. Grace read the terms. She would receive enough money to buy a small home. Ethan's tuition would be paid. No charges would be filed. In exchange, Grace had to leave Massachusetts, end all contact with Noah, declare Claire's recording unreliable, and admit she encouraged Noah to call her mom. You planted the bracelet, Grace said. Victoria did not answer. You changed the therapy report. Still no answer. Grace picked up the pen. She imagined Ethan losing his certification. She imagined courtrooms, legal bills, and employers refusing to hire a nanny accused of stealing from a dead woman. She placed the tip of the pen above the signature line. A strand of blue thread had caught around the separated sole of her shoe. Noah's small fingers had pulled that thread through the leather while whispering, "Now they won't leave you." Grace tore the agreement in half. He has already lost one mother. I will not teach him that another one can be purchased. Victoria's face hardened. Then you will lose everything. Maybe. But he will know I did not sell him. Security arrived to escort Grace from the estate. Daniel stood in the entrance hall. He did not order them to stop. Noah appeared at the top of the staircase. Grace. She looked up. I have to leave for a little while. No. I will explain everything. You said you wouldn't go. I said I would never disappear without telling you. Noah ran down the steps. A staff member caught him before he reached her. Mom? His scream filled the hall. Grace's shoe broke completely as she stepped outside. She removed both shoes and carried them in one hand. Noah fought to reach her, calling Mom again and again. Then the words stopped. His mouth remained open, but no sound came out. Grace walked barefoot down the stone steps while Daniel watched his son lose his voice. Margaret followed Grace to the gate. I did not believe Claire when she said Victoria controlled everything, she whispered. I thought grief had confused her. She opened the back of her car. Claire's red umbrella lay inside. Victoria told me to throw this away. Grace took it. At Ethan's apartment, her brother cleaned the cuts on her feet. You should sign the agreement, he said. I can leave school. No. You could go to jail. Noah could believe I abandoned him. Ethan looked at the shoes on the floor. I would rather leave school than watch you lie for me. Grace hugged him. Back at the Mercer estate, Daniel found Noah sleeping outside Grace's empty room. The silver button lay beneath Daniel's office door. That night, Grace opened the red umbrella in Ethan's kitchen. One section of the handle felt heavier. Ethan used a screwdriver to remove the cap. A tiny memory card slid into Grace's palm. Someone began pounding on the apartment door. Ethan turned off the lights. The pounding came again. Grace, a man called. It's Daniel. Grace did not open the door immediately. Why are you here? She asked through it. To apologize. You have apologized before. I know. What changed? Silence followed. Then Daniel spoke. I watched them take you away because I was afraid of being wrong. That made me wrong when it mattered. Grace opened the door. Daniel stood alone. His tie was loose. He looked as though he had not slept. No lawyers? Ethan asked. No. No security? No. Grace showed him the memory card. Ethan connected it to an old computer and began repairing the damaged files. The first folder contained Foundation bank records. Money had moved from charitable accounts into Lang Strategic Consulting, a company owned by Victoria's father. Another folder contained emails. In one, Victoria wrote that her father's home would be seized unless she transferred funds before the end of the week. In another, she promised to return every dollar after marrying Daniel. Grace read the messages twice. She was saving her father. Daniel nodded. By stealing from sick children. Fear explains the beginning, Grace said. It does not excuse what she did after. A third folder contained an audio recording. Victoria's voice filled the apartment. You have no idea what it is like to lose everything, Claire. Claire answered, then you should understand why foundation money matters to people who have nothing. If Daniel discovers this, my father dies in disgrace. That does not give you the right to steal. You will not tell him. I already wrote the letter. There was a sharp sound. Then Victoria said, Daniel has not opened one of your private letters in months. Grace looked at him. Daniel closed his eyes. The memory card also contained Noah's original therapy report. The doctor had recommended consistent contact with Grace and warned against sudden separation. Victoria had changed the summary. Ethan found one final video file showing Victoria's assistant placing Claire's bracelet inside Grace's suitcase. Daniel called federal investigators. He cancelled the engagement in a 3-minute phone conversation. Victoria screamed loudly enough for Grace to hear from across the kitchen. Daniel's attorneys warned him that the scandal could damage Mercer Hotels, the foundation, and several major partnerships. My son has already paid more than the company ever will, Daniel said. He scheduled a public emergency hearing. Before it took place, Grace insisted on seeing Noah. Daniel drove her to the estate, but she stopped him before entering. I will not return as your employee. I understand. I make decisions about Noah with you, not beneath you. Yes. And you do not use money to solve what requires time. Daniel nodded. I built hotels in 12 countries so strangers would feel cared for, he said. My own son had to find that feeling in the servants' hallway. Grace looked at him. Then start walking down that hallway. Noah sat on his bedroom floor facing the wall. Grace entered alone. She did not say his name. She placed the torn shoe beside him and sat down. Minutes passed. Noah reached toward the blue thread. Then he leaned into her. Grace wrapped both arms around him. You came back, he whispered. I said I would explain before I ever left you. His voice was rough, but it had returned. Daniel stood in the doorway with tears in his eyes. Noah looked at him but did not reach out. Not yet. Victoria announced that she would attend the public hearing. She claimed Grace and Ethan had fabricated the evidence to extort Daniel. She invited donors, reporters, and board members, certain Grace would collapse under questioning. On the morning of the hearing, Noah handed Daniel a new family drawing. Claire stood beneath the red umbrella in the sky. Grace and Noah stood together. Daniel had been moved from the distant black car to Grace's other side. Beneath the picture, Noah had written 5 words. "This time, stand with us." Daniel folded the drawing carefully and placed it inside his jacket. "I will," he said. The foundation hearing took place in the same ballroom where Grace's shoes had been mocked. Victoria arrived in a dark red dress with 3 attorneys. She looked composed until Grace entered wearing the same repaired shoes. Noah held Grace's hand. Daniel walked beside them. Victoria's attorney questioned Grace first. "You were hired as a nanny, correct?" "Yes." "Not as Noah Mercer's mother?" "No." "Yet you allowed him to call you mom." Grace looked at Noah. "I allowed a frightened child to speak the word that made him feel safe." "You crossed a professional boundary." Correcting him mattered less than making sure he knew someone was staying. The attorney displayed photographs of Grace entering Claire's room. Daniel's team played the full video showing Grace carrying Noah's blanket. They presented the original therapy report, the altered summary, the bank transfers, and the recording of Victoria threatening Claire. Ethan explained how he recovered the memory card. Margaret testified that Victoria controlled Claire's mail and visitors. Finally, investigators played the video of Victoria's assistant planting the bracelet. Victoria's control cracked. "I took the money for my father," she said. "He was about to lose his home and business. Do you understand what people do to you when they know you are poor?" Her eyes moved to Grace's shoes. "I grew up being laughed at by women like the ones who laughed at you." Grace stood. "You knew exactly what humiliation felt like. You simply decided someone else should carry it." Victoria looked toward Daniel. "I planned to repay everything after we married." "You used my wife's illness," he said. "I protected my family. You destroyed mine." Investigators escorted Victoria from the ballroom. She was not dragged away. She walked with her head high, still trying to preserve the image she valued more than the truth. Daniel addressed the board. "I failed Claire by avoiding her grief. I failed Grace by doubting her when courage required trust. I failed Noah by treating fatherhood like another responsibility I could delegate." He announced that he would repay every dollar removed from the foundation and fund an independent investigation. Then Noah stepped forward. He carried Claire's silver button in one hand and Grace's torn shoe in the other. Reporters lowered their cameras. Noah looked toward Grace before speaking. "Claire is my first mom." His voice trembled, but he continued. "Grace is the mom who came after the worst day." He held up the shoe. "She walked to my room when I cried. She stayed outside the door when I couldn't talk. One mom does not make the other smaller." Daniel knelt beside him. Noah placed the silver button in Daniel's palm. Then he took his father's hand. Daniel looked at Grace. "I want you to remain in Noah's life permanently. Not as an employee. As his legal guardian and as my equal." Grace did not answer immediately. "Noah is not a company problem," she said. "I know. He cannot be managed when grief becomes inconvenient." "I know. And you stay too." Daniel looked at his son. "I will." Grace nodded. The ballroom erupted in applause, but Noah turned away from the crowd and wrapped his arms around her. Later, Daniel placed the torn shoes inside a glass display at the foundation's entrance. The plaque beneath them read, "Never measure the person who serves by what she can afford to wear." 8 months later, the Mercer estate no longer felt like a luxury hotel. Noah's drawings covered one kitchen wall. His sneakers often remained in the hallway. Daniel had stopped asking staff to remove every sign that a child lived in the house. Grace became Noah's legal co-guardian, but she kept her own apartment nearby. She did not want security to become dependence. Daniel understood. Grace also returned to college and completed the childhood development degree she had abandoned while caring for her mother. The Mercer Foundation opened the Claire Mercer Caregiver and Child Grief Center. Grace served as its executive director. The center offered grief counseling, emergency childcare, legal support for domestic workers, and education grants for people who had left school to care for relatives. Ethan became the center's first full-time electrical contractor after earning his certification. He framed a copy of Grace's tuition receipt and kept it in his office. Daniel changed through ordinary acts. He packed Noah's lunches, though the sandwiches were often uneven. He attended therapy appointments instead of sending a driver. He learned to tap twice before entering Noah's room. He asked Grace's opinion before making parenting decisions. Once, Noah tore his jacket before school. Daniel tried to sew it and made a knot so large that Noah laughed until milk came through his nose. It was the first time Grace heard them laugh together without grief waiting behind it. They visited Claire's grave as a family. Noah placed the silver button beneath the engraved stone for several minutes, then returned it to the wooden box he kept beside his bed. "I don't need to carry it every day," he said. Grace kissed his forehead. "No. You remember her without it." Noah made a new family drawing. Claire stood beneath a red umbrella in the sky. Grace held Noah's hand. Daniel stood beside them. Ethan and Margaret waved from the porch. Noah drew 2 hearts above the house. One evening, after he fell asleep, Daniel asked Grace to have dinner with him. "Is this a foundation meeting?" she asked. "No." "A parenting discussion?" "No." "An apology?" "I hope I am done inviting you places only to apologize." Grace smiled. Daniel did not ask her to move into the mansion. He did not offer her jewelry, money, or promises meant to rush forgiveness. "I would like to take you to dinner as Grace," he said. "Not as Noah's nanny. Not as the director. Just you." Grace considered him. "Dinner," she said. Nothing more promised. "Dinner is enough." Before Victoria's trial, Grace received a letter from her. Victoria apologized and asked Grace to tell the court that her choices came from fear rather than cruelty. Grace believed the fear. She also believed consequences mattered. She wrote back one sentence. "Understanding why someone caused harm does not require pretending the harm disappeared." Months later, the Grief Center held its opening celebration. Wealthy donors stood beside widowed parents, caregivers, and domestic workers. No one entered through a separate service door. Grace wore the new shoes Daniel had bought her, simple black leather chosen without a designer label. Near the entrance, she noticed a young caregiver trying to hide her worn shoes behind a chair. 2 guests glanced down and whispered. Grace walked over. She removed her own shoes and placed them beneath the chair. Then she stood beside the young woman in her stocking feet. The whispering stopped. Noah joined them and took Grace's hand. The people at the first gala had believed Grace's torn shoes revealed everything they needed to know about her. They saw poverty. Noah saw the feet that crossed dark hallways whenever he cried. They saw damage. He saw the blue thread placed by his own small hands. They saw an employee who should remember her position. He saw the woman who stayed when everyone else became too frightened, too busy, or too proud. Claire had given Noah life. Grace helped him trust life again. That was why one little word had silenced an entire ballroom. Not because Noah had forgotten who his mother was. Because he understood before the adults did that love could remember one mother while making room for another.